The massive bulk of Kepler Station rotated slowly against the starfield, its docking bays glowing with the soft blue light of atmospheric containment fields. Ships of every size and design moved in organized patterns around the station like metallic fish in a cosmic ocean. The luxury starliner Celestial Harmony gleamed among them, its sleek white hull adorned with golden trim that caught the light from 3 different suns. Minji Kim stood at the observation deck, watching the controlled chaos of interstellar travel. Her reflection in the reinforced transperistal showed a young woman with determined eyes and calloused hands that spoke of countless hours spent in research labs. The lightweight fabric of her travel clothes bore the subtle insignia of the Xenobio Research Institute, though few would recognize the small silver pin on her collar. Final boarding call for Starliner Celestial Harmony, departure to Centauri Prime, announced the station's AI in multiple languages and harmonic frequencies that could be understood by dozens of different species. Minji shouldered her research bag, feeling the weight of the portable lab equipment inside. 3 years of work had led to this moment. Her breakthrough in interspecies pheromone translation had caught the attention of the Colonial Development Board, and now she was heading to help establish something that had never been attempted before, a truly integrated colony where humans, Rigelians, vegan traders, and even the mysterious crystal-based lithoids could live and work together. The boarding tunnel hummed with energy as she walked through the security scanners. Her credentials passed through multiple verification systems in seconds, confirming her identity, medical clearance, and first-class passage authorization. Everything was in perfect order. The Celestial Harmony was a marvel of engineering that stretched nearly a kilometer from bow to stern. Its interior was designed to accommodate the needs of dozens of different species, with variable gravity sections, atmospheric zones, and even a quantum garden where plants from across the galaxy grew in impossible harmony. The soft lighting automatically adjusted as she entered, sensors detecting her human biology and optimizing the spectrum for her comfort. Senior Flight Attendant Dekma stood near the entrance to the passenger sections like a guardian at a temple. Gate the Altarian was an impressive sight, nearly 3 meters tall with silver scales that shifted color with his mood. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, and that philosophy seemed to extend to his view of other species. His serpentine eyes, adapted for seeing in multiple spectrums, fixed on Minji with unmistakable contempt. Boarding pass and identification, he demanded, his voice carrying the subtle hiss that marked his species. Speech patterns. Minji handed over her documents with a polite smile. She had dealt with species prejudice before in her career, though usually in more academic settings where professional courtesy provided some protection. The documents clearly showed her first-class accommodation in Section A, complete with a private research suite that would allow her to continue her work during the 2-week journey. Dekma's scales shifted to a darker hue as he examined the boarding pass with exaggerated care. His colleague, a younger Altarian female named Silka, watched from nearby with obvious discomfort. Another human claiming first-class privileges, Dekma hissed loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. His words carried the particulate venom that some older Altarians still held toward humanity, remnants of conflicts from generations past. These creatures always think they deserve more than they've earned, probably used their political connections to upgrade from economy class. The comment stung because it echoed doubts Minji sometimes had about herself. Had she really earned this opportunity through merit alone, or had her connections in the scientific community opened doors that remained closed to others? But she knew her research spoke for itself. The breakthrough in chemical communication between species had taken years of painstaking work, often in dangerous conditions on remote worlds. "Sir, my credentials are valid," she said calmly, keeping her voice steady despite the growing attention from other passengers. "The Colonial Development Board assigned me this passage for official business." "Official business," Dekma repeated, mockingly, his scales now showing flashes of angry red. "Yes, humans are always on official business when they want special treatment." He turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. "Do you know what humans call official business? Taking credit for other species' discoveries and calling it progress." A few passengers nodded in agreement, including a group of Centaurian merchants who had their own complicated history with human traders. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent, unwilling to get involved in what was clearly becoming a confrontation. Dekma made a show of consulting his handheld scanner, pressing buttons with theatrical precision. "Oh my," he said with forced surprise, "there seems to be an error in the system, a significant error." His cold smile revealed teeth designed for tearing flesh. You've been reassigned to cargo class accommodations. Section J, level 12. That's where you belong. The cargo section was barely fit for passengers, originally designed for transporting livestock and emergency evacuation. The seats were basic restraint harnesses, the atmosphere recycling was minimal, and there were no research facilities. More importantly, it was a deliberate insult, a way of putting her in her place among beings he considered lesser. Mingy felt the eyes of dozens of passengers on her as she stood at the crossroads of dignity and confrontation. Her research bag suddenly felt heavier, filled with the hopes of everyone who believed in a future where species could truly work together. The celestial harmony shuddered as it prepared for the jump to hyperspace. Through the small porthole in the cargo section, Mingy watched the stars begin to stretch into brilliant lines of light. The hyperspace engines hummed with a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through every molecule of the ship. Within seconds, the familiar star patterns disappeared, replaced by the swirling purple and gold energy streams of hyperspace. In the cramped cargo section, Mingy found herself surrounded by emergency passengers and low-fare travelers. Most were migrant workers heading to the outer colonies, their belongings packed in simple bags and containers. The air recycling system worked overtime, creating a constant background hum that mixed with the conversations in a dozen different languages and harmonic frequencies. She had barely settled into her uncomfortable restraint harness when Deck appeared, his silver scales gleaming under the harsh emergency lighting. He moved through the cargo section like a predator surveying his territory, his serpentine eyes scanning each passenger with obvious disdain. "Attention cargo passengers," he announced, his voice carrying the artificial authority of someone drunk on small power. "Meal service will begin shortly. Please remain in your assigned seats and wait for distribution." The meal service in cargo class was a far cry from the elegant dining experience offered in first class. Instead of the varied cuisines designed for different species' nutritional needs, cargo passengers received standard nutrient blocks and recycled water. The blocks were technically edible for most species, but they tasted like processed cardboard mixed with synthetic vitamins. Deck personally delivered Mingy's meal, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the section. "Here's your nutrition allocation," he said, with theatrical emphasis. "I do hope it meets the standards you humans are accustomed to. Though I suppose you're used to taking what doesn't belong to you." Several passengers looked up from their own meals, curious about the obvious tension. Dekma seemed to feed off the attention, his scales shifting to brighter colors as he continued his performance. "You know," he said, addressing the entire section while pointing at Mingy, "this human claims to be some kind of scientist. Says she's going to help build a colony on Centauri Prime." His laugh was a harsh, hissing sound. "But humans are known for falsifying documents. They're probably just another Earth dweller trying to steal alien technology and claim it as their own discovery." A group of vegan traders in the corner nodded in agreement. Their species had a long history of conflict with human merchants who had undercut their traditional trading routes. One of them, a tall female with metallic blue skin, spoke up in support. "Humans always claim they're helping," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species. "But they only help themselves. They take our trade routes, copy our technologies, and then sell them back to us at higher prices." Vecma's confidence grew with each supportive comment. He began walking through the cargo section like a performer, working a crowd, his voice getting louder with each statement. "These primitive Earth dwellers think they can just buy their way into civilized society," he declared, gesturing dramatically. "They wave around their credits and their fake credentials, but they don't belong among real spacefaring species. They're barely evolved apes who learned to use starships." More passengers began to pay attention, some nodding in agreement while others looked increasingly uncomfortable. A young Regelian family huddled closer together, their large eyes reflecting fear and confusion. The parents whispered to their children in their species' clicking language, trying to explain the strange hostility they were witnessing. "Humans destroy everything they touch," Beckmer continued, now fully committed to his speech. "They poisoned their own homeworld, started wars across half the galaxy, and now they want to contaminate the colonies with their backward thinking. This one probably can't even read real scientific data." Mingy's hands trembled as she reached for her personal communicator, trying to keep her movements subtle. The device was small, designed to look like a simple entertainment tablet, but it contained sophisticated recording equipment that could capture both audio and visual data in multiple spectrums. She had used it countless times to document her research, but never imagined she'd need it to record her own harassment. The recording began just as Vecma launched into another tirade. "Look at her," he said, pointing directly at Minji, trying to hide behind her little gadgets, probably sending messages to her human contacts, begging them to get her out of the situation her lies created. The ship's advanced AI system, known as ARIA, monitored every aspect of passenger well-being during flight. Sophisticated sensors tracked heart rates, stress hormones, and even micro-expressions to ensure passenger safety and comfort. In the first sections, the AI would adjust lighting, temperature, and even background music to optimize each passenger's experience. But in the cargo section, ARIA's sensors were detecting something unusual. Minji's stress levels had spiked far beyond normal travel anxiety. Her heart rate was elevated, her breathing shallow, and her body chemistry showed signs of extreme distress. The AI began cross-referencing the situation with its vast database of passenger incidents and diplomatic protocols. What ARIA discovered triggered a cascade of alerts through the ship's systems. The young human woman being harassed wasn't just any passenger. Her biometric signature matched someone in the AI's priority database, someone whose well-being was considered a matter of galactic importance. Deep in the ship's computer core, automated systems began flagging the situation as a potential diplomatic incident. Messages started queuing for transmission to multiple authorities across the galaxy, waiting for the ship to exit hyperspace where they could be sent instantly across the quantum communication network. Meanwhile, Vecma continued his public harassment, unaware that every word was being recorded not just by Minji's device, but by the ship's own security systems. The rest period aboard the Celestial Harmony brought a welcome quiet to the ship's corridors. Most passengers had retreated to their quarters or common areas, leaving only the soft hum of life support systems and the distant whisper of hyperspace engines. In the cargo section, the harsh lighting had dimmed to a more tolerable level, giving passengers a chance to rest during the long journey. Minji sat in her uncomfortable restraint seat, staring out the small porthole at the swirling energies of hyperspace. The purple and gold streams seemed to dance in patterns that defied understanding, reminding her of the complex equations that governed faster-than-light travel. She had always found hyperspace beautiful, but tonight it felt like a prison keeping her trapped with her tormentors. Her personal communicator lay heavy in her hands. The device was more sophisticated than it appeared, equipped with quantum encryption and priority channels that could reach anywhere in the galaxy. Most passengers carried simple communication devices that could only send messages to nearby systems, but Minji's work had earned her access to the military-grade quantum network. She hesitated before activating the device. Making this call would change everything, but Vecma's harassment had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just about her anymore. If someone with her connections could be treated this way, what happened to ordinary humans who traveled without protection? The quantum communicator came to life with a soft blue glow. The display showed connection options that most people would never see, direct lines to research stations, colonial governors, and military commanders across the galaxy. But Minji scrolled past all of these to a simple contact labeled home. Connection took several seconds to establish, quantum particles dancing across impossible distances to link to points in space and time. When the familiar face appeared on the small screen, Minji felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over her. "Hello, Mum," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no other passengers were close enough to overhear. "I think you need to know what's happening out here." The woman on the screen had the same determined eyes as Minji, though hers were marked by years of command decisions and diplomatic negotiations. Admiral Haijin Kim sat in what appeared to be her private office aboard a starship, the distinctive blue and silver uniform of the Terran Defense Coalition visible in the frame. "Minji, you look upset. What's wrong?" The Admiral's voice carried the immediate concern of a mother, even though the call was crossing several star systems in real time. "There's a flight attendant on this ship who's been harassing me since we left Kepler Station. He moved me to cargo class, called humans primitive, said we don't belong among civilized species." Minji's voice remained steady, but her mother could hear the pain beneath the professional calm. Admiral Kim's expression hardened as her daughter continued. "He's been making announcements to other passengers, saying humans falsify documents and steal alien technology. It's getting worse, Mom. Some of the passengers are starting to agree with him." The Admiral was silent for a moment, her mind clearly working through the implications. As head of the Terran Defense Coalition's diplomatic fleet, she understood that incidents like this could spark larger conflicts between species, but as a mother she was simply angry that someone had hurt her daughter. "Which ship are you on?" she asked, her voice taking on the tone of command. "The Celestial Harmony, headed for Centauri Prime. We're about 6 hours out from Way Station Alpha." "I'll handle this," Admiral Kim said firmly. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes, I think so. But, Mom, this isn't just about me. If they can treat me this way, what about other humans who don't have family in the Coalition?" The Admiral nodded grimly. "You're right. This ends now." She paused, studying her daughter's face through the quantum link. "I'm proud of you for calling Mingyi, and I'm proud of the work you're doing out there." The call ended after exactly 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds had just set in motion a chain of events that would reach across the galaxy. Admiral Kim immediately activated her command console, her fingers flying across holographic controls that most people would never be authorized to touch. Priority channels opened to Galactic Command, the Centauri Colonial Authority, and the Interspecies Transit Commission. Within minutes, quantum messages were racing across space at speeds that made the Celestial Harmony's hyperspace engines look slow. Aboard the luxury starliner, Captain Veltash was reviewing navigation reports when his bridge exploded into activity. Alert signals began flashing across every console, each one carrying the distinctive codes that meant immediate attention was required. Captain called his first officer, a nervous Rigelian whose large eyes were wide with alarm. "We're receiving priority override signals from multiple authorities." The main display screen lit up with incoming transmissions. First came the seal of Galactic Command, the governing body that coordinated activities between star systems, then the distinctive eagle and stars of the Terran Defense Coalition. Finally, the golden spiral of the Centauri Colonial Authority. "All three major powers are sending us orders," the communications officer reported, her voice tight with tension. "They want us to dock at Way Station Alpha immediately. No delays, no questions." Captain Veltash had been commanding for over 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. When multiple galactic authorities agreed on something, it usually meant war was about to break out, or a diplomatic crisis was unfolding. "How long until we reach Way Station Alpha?" he demanded. 47 minutes at current speed, sir. Send acknowledgement to all three authorities. Tell them we're complying immediately." The bridge crew worked frantically to adjust their course, the massive ship's engines straining to change direction in hyperspace. Down in the passenger sections, people began to notice the ship's movement as artificial gravity fluctuated slightly. Dekma was in the middle of another speech about human inferiority when security teams began moving through the ship. The armored figures wore the neutral gray uniforms of ship security, but their movement patterns suggested they were looking for something or someone specific. "What's happening?" Dekma asked nervously as a security officer approached him. His scales had shifted to a nervous yellow color, and his earlier confidence was rapidly evaporating. The security officer, a professional who had seen many difficult situations, simply shook his head. "Orders from the bridge. All passengers are to remain in their current locations until further notice." Back on the bridge, Captain Veltash stared at the priority messages still flooding his communications board. His face had gone pale as he realized the magnitude of whatever was happening on his ship. "Sir," his first officer said quietly, "what could cause all three major powers to issue simultaneous orders?" The captain looked at the swirling energies of hyperspace outside his viewports, then at the steady stream of high-priority messages still arriving from across the galaxy. "We've just been flagged by every major authority in this sector," he said slowly. "Someone on this ship has connections. We can't afford to anger." Way Station Alpha appeared ahead of them like a massive metal flower blooming in the darkness of space. The station's rotating arms stretched for kilometers in every direction, each one capable of docking ships the size of the Celestial Harmony. But what made every passenger and crew member pressed against the viewports wasn't the station itself. It was the three warships waiting in perfect formation around it. The TDC destroyers hung in space like sleeping giants, their dark hulls bristling with weapons arrays and sensor equipment. Each ship was nearly as large as the Celestial Harmony, but built for war rather than comfort. Their angular design spoke of function over form, every surface optimized for combat efficiency and survival. In hostile space, leading the formation was the flagship Soul's Pride, a vessel that had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Its hull bore the scars of a dozen diplomatic missions that had turned dangerous, and its reputation for arriving just in time to prevent wars was known in every star system. The ship's distinctive golden trim caught the light from the station's docking arrays, making it seem to glow against the star field. Captain Veltash stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display with growing amazement. The three destroyers had arranged themselves in a protective formation around Way Station Alpha, their weapons powered down but ready. It was a show of force that said more than words ever could. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving docking instructions from the Soul's Pride. They want us to dock at Bay 7, and they're sending over a boarding party." A boarding party? Veltash's voice cracked slightly. In 30 years of commanding passenger ships, he had never been boarded by military vessels. "What kind of boarding party?" "High-level diplomatic escort, sir. They're requesting permission to come aboard immediately." The docking process took 20 minutes that felt like hours. The Celestial Harmony maneuvered carefully into position, its massive bulk settling into the station's docking clamps with mechanical precision. Through the viewports, passengers could see the sleek forms of military shuttles moving between the ships, their blue engine trails painting lines across the darkness. Inside the cargo section, Minji sat quietly in her restraint seat, watching the activity outside with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She knew her mother would come. Admiral Kim had never broken a promise in her life, but she also knew that this incident would have consequences far beyond their family. The ship's internal communication system crackled to life with Captain Veltash's voice, though it carried a nervous tremor that hadn't been there during the journey. "Attention all passengers and crew. We have been requested to dock at Way Station Alpha for a brief diplomatic meeting. Please remain in your current locations until further notice. Ship security will be coordinating with station authorities during this time." What the captain didn't mention was that the diplomatic meeting involved the most powerful woman in the Terran Defense Coalition, and that her boarding party included enough firepower to level a small city. The airlocks cycled with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the ship's hull. Passengers throughout the Celestial Harmony fell silent as they heard the distinctive sound of military boots on metal decking. The sound grew closer, accompanied by the soft whir of powered armor and the subtle electronic beeps of advanced security equipment. Admiral Hyjin Kim walked through the ship's corridors like she owned them, her command presence filling every space she entered. She wore the dress uniform of the Terran Defense Coalition, its blue fabric adorned with ribbons and medals that represented decades of service to galactic peace. Her security detail moved with professional efficiency, scanning each corridor and compartment they passed. Behind her walked Colonel Park Jin-hyuk, her chief of staff, and Commander Lee Seojin, head of her personal security team. Both men had served with the Admiral for years, and their loyalty to her was absolute. They had seen her negotiate with alien warlords, mediate disputes between entire star systems, and prevent conflicts that could have destroyed civilizations. But they had never seen her this focused, this determined. The Admiral's daughter had been attacked, and that made this personal in a way that transcended diplomacy. The passengers in first class watched in stunned silence as the military procession passed their comfortable seats and elegant dining areas. Some recognized Admiral Kim from news broadcasts. Others simply sensed the authority that surrounded her like a force field. Conversations died as she passed, replaced by whispered questions and nervous glances. Beckma was in the middle of explaining to a group of passengers why humans couldn't be trusted when the Admiral and her security team entered the cargo section. The flight attendant's voice died in his throat as he saw the military uniforms and the weapons that the security team carried with casual competence. "Where is Dr. Minji Kim?" Admiral Kim asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets and negotiated with emperors. The cargo section fell completely silent. Passengers who had been chatting in various languages stopped mid-sentence, their attention focused on the small drama unfolding before them. Even the ship's ventilation system seemed to quiet, as if the entire vessel was holding its breath. Minji stood slowly from her restraint seat, her research bag still clutched in her hands. For a moment, mother and daughter simply looked at each other across the cramped cargo compartment. Then Admiral Kim crossed the space between them in 3 quick strides and pulled Minji into a fierce embrace. "I'm sorry this happened to you," Admiral Kim said, her voice carrying both the tenderness of a mother and the authority of someone who had negotiated peace between worlds. "This should never have happened." The truth hit the assembled passengers and crew like a physical blow. Murmurs rippled through the cargo section as the reality of the situation became clear. The young woman they had watched being harassed and humiliated wasn't just any passenger. She was the daughter of the most powerful diplomat in human space. But that wasn't the end of the revelations. Colonel Park stepped forward with a data pad in his hands, his voice carrying clearly through the cargo section. Dr. Mingi Kim, he announced formally, architect of the Centauri Accords, designer of the first successful interspecies communication protocols, and the youngest person ever to receive the Galactic Peace Prize for her work in xenobiology. Scales shifted from their normal silver to a sickly gray color as the full weight of his actions crashed down on him. He had just spent hours publicly humiliating one of the most important scientists in the galaxy, the daughter of the woman who had prevented 3 major wars through sheer diplomatic skill. The galactic news networks picked up the story faster than a hyperspace jump. Within 6 hours of the Celestial Harmony incident, holographic displays across 1,000 worlds were showing the same shocking footage. The ship's security cameras had captured every moment of Vecma's harassment, and the recording from Minji's personal device provided crystal clear audio of his discriminatory comments. On Rigel Prime, the footage played in busy spaceport lounges, where travelers from dozens of species watched in uncomfortable silence. The massive screens showed a young human scientist being publicly humiliated, while other passengers either joined in or looked away. Many viewers saw themselves in those silent bystanders, remembering times when they had witnessed injustice, but chosen not to act. The Vegan Trade Council called an emergency session after the footage reached their homeworld. The blue-skinned traders who had supported Vecma's comments found themselves facing angry questions from their own people. How could they have participated in such treatment of someone who was literally working to build bridges between species? But it was on Earth that the reaction was strongest. Protest marches filled the streets of major cities as humans demanded better protection for their citizens traveling in space. The footage of Minji sitting quietly in cargo class, enduring insults with dignity while wearing the insignia of the Xenobiological Research Institute, became a symbol of humanity's struggle for respect among the stars. Stellar Luxury Lines, the company that operated the Celestial Harmony, found itself in the middle of a galactic scandal. Their stock price crashed as passengers cancelled bookings and travel agencies removed their ships from recommended lists. The company's board of directors held an emergency meeting that lasted 18 hours, trying to figure out how to save their reputation. CEO Marcus Veltar, an elderly Centaurian with decades of experience in interstellar travel, appeared on every major news network to personally apologize. His forearms gestured emphatically as he spoke, his translator implant working overtime to convey his distress in multiple languages. Stellar Luxury Lines was built on the principle that space travel should be safe and comfortable for all species, he declared. We have failed that principle, and we will do everything in our power to make this right. The company's response was swift and comprehensive. Vecma was suspended pending a full investigation, and mandatory anti-training was implemented for all employees. New protocols were established to prevent passengers from being moved from their assigned seats without proper cause, and complaint procedures were streamlined to ensure rapid response to harassment reports. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the incident, Minji Kim held a press conference aboard Way Station Alpha. The young scientist stood before a crowd of reporters from across the galaxy, her mother beside her in full military dress. Uniform. I want to thank everyone for their support, Minji began, her voice steady despite the dozens of recording devices pointed at her. But I also want to address the calls for severe punishment of flight attendant, Vecma. The crowd murmured with surprise. Most had expected her to demand the harshest possible penalties for her treatment. Vecma's actions were wrong, she continued, but I believe that understanding comes through experience, not through revenge. I'm requesting that instead of being terminated, he be assigned to work with the Human Altarian Cultural Exchange program. The program she mentioned was one of her own creation, designed to help members of different species understand each other's perspectives through direct interaction and education. It had been successful in several research stations, but had never been tested on someone who had actively discriminated against another species. Vecma grew up during the trade wars, Minji explained to the stunned reporters. His species lost friends and family to human military actions. His prejudice didn't appear overnight, and it won't disappear overnight either. But if we can help him see humans as individuals rather than enemies, we might prevent future incidents. The response to her proposal was mixed. Some praised her wisdom and compassion, while others argued that letting Vecma off easy would encourage more discrimination. But within a week the Altarian had agreed to participate in the program, perhaps recognizing that it was his only chance to salvage his career. Meanwhile, the Celestial Harmony continued its journey to Centauri Prime with a new crew member, Commander Lee Saijin had volunteered to escort Minji for the remainder of her trip, and his presence ensured that her treatment improved dramatically. She was moved back to her first-class suite, where she could continue her research in comfort. Centauri colonies had been watching the news coverage with great interest. The new settlement that Minji was helping to establish had been controversial from the beginning, with some species arguing that true integration was impossible. But the way she had handled the discrimination incident gave them hope that maybe, just maybe, different species could learn to live together peacefully. When Minji finally arrived at Centauri Prime, she was greeted by a crowd that included humans, Rigelians, vegans, and even a few Altarians who had come to show their support. The colony's integration project, which had been struggling with cultural conflicts, suddenly found new momentum as species that had been suspicious of each other began working together. 6 months later, reports from Centauri Prime showed remarkable progress. The colony had become a model of interspecies cooperation, with humans and aliens working side by side on everything from agriculture to advanced technology research. The success attracted attention from across the galaxy, with other worlds requesting similar programs. Thek single quotes more, meanwhile, had completed his cultural exchange training and was now working as a liaison between human and Altarian communities. His transformation from discriminator to advocate had become almost as famous as the original incident, showing that people could change when given the chance and proper support. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from the events aboard the Celestial Harmony. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their advanced technology, their growing military power, or their expanding colonial empire. It was their remarkable ability to turn prejudice into progress, to transform enemies into allies, and to build bridges where others saw only walls. Years later, when historians wrote about the turning point in interspecies relations, they would point to a young scientist who chose forgiveness over revenge, understanding over anger, and hope over hatred. The Celestial Harmony incident had started as a story of discrimination and injustice, but it had become something much more powerful, a testament to the human spirit and its capacity to create positive change even in the darkest circumstances. The